Greetings, this is Jamal coming to you guys from Imperial Comics and Games. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our inaugural video of 5 cards in 5 days. This new series that we're going to be starting today is going to be looking at some epic spoilers, some mythic spoilers for Zendikar Rising. The new set scheduled to be released later in the month of September from Magic the Gathering. So for the next 5 days, we're going to look at 5 cards each day that we want to spoil and talk about and get extra hype about it. So come on, join us and get ready. First card that we're going to be looking at in our 5 cards for 5 days is going to be Drana, the Last Blood Chief. For 3 and 2 black, you get a legendary creature that's a vampire cleric with 4 power and 4 toughness. Drana is flying, and listen to this text, you guys. Whenever Drana, the Last Blood Chief attacks, defending player chooses a non-legendary creature card in your graveyard. You return that card to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. The creature is a vampire in addition to its other types. I can see this having a lot of utility and a lot of fun uses in our modern tournaments that we have, and it's also going to be useful in standard. And for all the dredge players and folks that love to wallow in their graveyards like the ugly animals that they tend to be, this card is going to be right up your alley. If you haven't noticed, I'm not the biggest fan of dredge, but I'll leave that alone. But anywho, it's a fun mechanic nevertheless. This is a cool card. I do, however, like vampires. One of the first modern decks that I built was a vampire deck. It wasn't the best, but it was fun. And I still mess around with vampire decks from time to time, even now. This may be a reason for me to put it back together or to make something new out of it. But Drana looks to be a fun card and one that can have a lot of utility in a variety of decks. The next one, since we're on Zendikar, we have to talk about Nissa. Now, for those that haven't been following the lore of Magic the Gathering, the last time we really saw Nissa do a bunch was at the conclusion of the War of the Sparks storyline back on Ravnica. And during that whole thing, you know, Nicobolus was being cool and trying to bring order to the multiverse and all those things, and that his betraying brother Ugin stabbed him in the back, and Liliana stabbed him in the back, and everybody messed him up, but I'll leave that alone. We've not been back to Zendikar since the Eldrazi were there, right? So now we're coming back and we're going to see about the healing of this plane, and at the core of it hopefully will be Nissa. This is her home plane, and she's all about big old green creatures and mana, and because Zendikar is all about land and mana, because it's just known for that. So look at Nissa. This is unique because Nissa now has a black element. So this is Nissa of the Shadowed Boughs. I had a conversation as to whether or not they should be pronounced bows or boughs, but if my Christmas hymnology or Christmas carols are accurate, it should be boughs. And for 2, a black and a green, you get a legendary planeswalker, Nissa, who has landfall, which is a trigger made famous in the previous Zendikar sets, which says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a loyalty counter on Nissa of the Shadowed Boughs. +1, untap target land you control. You may have it become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste and menace until end of turn is still on land. That's kind of a classic Nissa planeswalker ability. She likes to turn lands and things into elemental creatures. -5. You may put a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield from your hand or graveyard with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. I think it's a really neat twist to add the splash of black to Nissa. We've seen the blue added to her in previous sets, and this is kind of a unique take, and I like it. You know, she's going to be pulling some stuff, or dealing with some stuff in the graveyard, and that's different. That's different for Nissa, and different and new things are a good thing. She starts with 4 loyalty, so for 4 mana for a 4 loyalty planeswalker, this could be useful. It doesn't have an ultimate in the traditional sense. This is more akin to what I saw in War of the Spark with those types of planeswalkers. That's what she reminds me of, but it still could be useful. You can get to that 5 loyalty after 1 turn, just 1/+1, and then you can do the -5 if you're wanting to do that. But overall, it's a pretty cool card. I love the art though. I'm looking at the borderless example of it. on the spoilers, and it's beautiful art, and it fits kind of the darker turn I think Nissa's character is going to be taking since she lost her love in Chandra, thanks to Watsi not liking that storyline and all the things of getting messed up on Zendikar and all that, but we'll leave that alone. Next on our list is Tazri. Tazri, Beacon of Unity. This is a legendary creature, human warrior, so all those human players, y'all know who you are. For 4 and a white, you can cast this 4/6 creature, legendary creature. This spell costs 1 less for each creature in your party. So the new mechanic for Zendikar Rising seems to be this party thing. When I read this and heard this, I immediately thought D&D. And so if you didn't know, Wizards of the Coast, the company that owns Magic and deals with Magic, also owns Dungeons and Dragons now. And so you've already seen a few sets in the past that have been released in Dungeons and Dragons. They did one for Ravnica. They've done one for Theros where they've made D&D sets. To me, this screams a D&D set is coming for Zendikar, for future D&D sets, because literally you're making a D&D party in this new mechanic. Listen to this. For 2/blue or 2/black, 2/red or 2/green, it's the multicolor thing. You can either pay the 2 or do 1 blue, pay the 2 and do 1 black, pay the 2, do 1 red, or pay the 2 and do 1 green. If you do that, you can look at the top 6 cards of your library and you can reveal up to 2 cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard, and or ally cards from among them and put them into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. In effect, you can set up your party. Now I'm going to do a separate video on how this party mechanic is going to work in Zendikar, but for now we can see that this card is going to be at the core of that mechanic, and it's kind of a neat thing. You can, if you love D&D and you love having a party, well, you're going to get to do that in your standard deck or whatever deck you're going to try to put together. All right, the next card we have is a favorite of mine, Omnath. I love Omnath. I still have my Omnath Commander deck from years ago. I still use it, I still play it. But the Omnath I use is Omnath the Locust of Rage, the big green mean jelly bean Omnath. Well, this Omnath is even bigger, it's even greater. So we saw an Omnath that was given to us that added blue, and we had the original Omnath, the Locust of Mana, that was only green. And forgive me if I got my chronology wrong. But now we get Omnath, Locust of Creation. This is a 4/4 legendary elemental creature for a red, a green, a white, and a blue. So now we've added yet another color. We're adding white. When Omnath, Locust of Creation, enters the battlefield, draw a card. So as soon as he hits the ground, you draw a card. He has a landfall, which the previous Omnath cards, Omnath Locust of Rage, did have as well. Landfall here says, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, add red, green, white, and blue mana to your mana pool. If this is the third time, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. Now, when I first read this, or had this read to me, I should say, I was extremely excited because I love my Omnath deck and I could just see changing Omnath Locust of Rage from the commander to being in the 99 and making Omnath Locust of Creation my commander. But then I thought about it some more, and it's still a cool mechanic, but it's not as cool as I thought it was. And here's why I say that. Because the first time you play a land, you gain 4 life. The second time you play a land, you get 4 mana in the colors of red, green, white, and blue, which is awesome. The third time you play a land, you deal 4 damage to everything that's not yours, right? To each opponent, each planeswalker you don't control. Now, this does not hit creatures. That's the first thing I'll point out to you. Number 2, it is not a repeatable effect. Okay. After you play your third land, there are no more landfall triggers, if I'm reading this correctly, for this Omnath. When I first heard it, I was thinking this was a repeated landfall trigger, which would be great because in my current Omnath deck, I get a lot of landfall triggers, make a ton of tokens and either sack them or have haste and swing or do something funny like that. Here, however, after your third landfall, it stops. And that's a little sad. I was hoping that it would keep going. I just keep bolting you for, well, not bolting, but keep hitting you for 4. Boom, 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 boom. But the card does not allow for that. I'm sure there's some ways you can still abuse and break this card, but as of right now, it stops after the 3rd card. Nevertheless, it's still cool. It's only 4 mana to cast it. Granted, it's a spectrum of colors, but it's still only 4 mana compared to, I think, the 7 Omnath Locus of Rage was in the past. Last but not least, for our 5th card for this video, it's going to be the Lotus Cobra. This is a reprint of an old staple card. I love this card. It's in that same Omnath deck I've been talking about. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because the art is really cool. As you can see, I am a member of Cobra, and I have to represent. And so here is Lotus Cobra. For 1 and a green, you get a creature snake, just a regular creature. It's 2/1, but it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. So in effect, it can double the mana that you just played once per land that you play. So if I play a forest, I get another land in addition that goes into my mana pool of any color of my choosing. So if I played 3 lands, which is very possible with a landfall deck, let's say I play 3 lands, I could have 3 floating mana of whatever color in my mana pool, effectively doubling my mana that turn. So it can be very effective, very useful in landfall decks, things with a lot of landfall triggers. So with that being said, we're going to stop there. Thank you for joining us for the first video of our 5 cards in 5 days. I look forward to spoiling a few more cards in our next video. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for your support of Imperial Comics and Games, and keep checking our channel for new videos and new content. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care.